Hello, everybody. Welcome to my review of Babel by R.F. Kuang. I am feeling a little sick and I have no script, so I'm just going to kind of like have a conversation, share what I liked and what I didn't like about the book. So Babel is written by R.F. Kuang. She also did the Poppy Roll series, which I do want to make a video on eventually in the future. So Babel is also the first book that I have fully annotated. I've never really liked annotating that much, like writing in a book. Okay, so first off, this is a little out of order, but Babel is the first book coming from R.F. Kuang's debut series, which I talked about earlier, The Poppy War, and I'll talk about it in its own video. But I think the writing style between the Poppy War series and Babel is like significantly increased. When I started reading this book, I was immediately coming off the coattails of the Poppy Wool. So when I picked it up and started reading it, I was kind of like shocked a little bit about how the style and the prose of the text have like really changed. While in actuality, like the gap between the release of the final book in the series and this book was like a day or two, but to me it was literally like 2 weeks before in between picking up the books. So immediately, like the first thing I noticed is that this kind of feels like a PhD proof like thesis. Like if you open the book, you get its like full like legal name, which is Babel, the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators Revolution. And that's a lot. And of course, there's a lot to digest here, but I would say each of these like subtitles are very important to the story overall. I was kind of like getting, midway through, and I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? But yeah, I think these are very important themes and events that happen in the story. And I don't know, I kind of think it's kind of cool how it's like a super duper long name. Okay, to get into it, I'm going to kind of give a summary or kind of a synopsis of the world and the magic system and some of the characters. I'll try to be as non-spoilery as possible. But if you are like hypersensitive to spoilers, I'll just say kind of skip over this and go into like the pros and cons section I want to have towards the end. Okay, so Babel takes place in 1830s London. We have this character named Robin Swift that was taken into the possession of by a professor at Oxford. Specifically, a professor at the university's Royal Institute of Translation. So basically what this college does at Oxford is they take these metal balls, and on one side they inscribe a word, and then on another side they inscribe a word in a different language that means the same. However, since the translation will not be perfect, there's going to be a meaning in that word that gets lost in translation. So whatever that word is and what it means, it will derive a magical effect. So what this is used for, it increases the efficiency of grain mills. It makes these carriages that aren't drawn by horses. And a big thing that they showed is that it increased steam power like drastically. So anyway, Robin from a very young age gets conditioned and taught to learn all these new languages and be proficient in Chinese because that is what Oxford needs. Later on, Robin will go to Oxford and study at the Institute of Translation, also known as Babel. There he'll meet Raimi, Victoria. It's not Victoria. It's spelled completely different and it's probably pronounced differently. But in my head, that's how I said it. So I guess for the sake of the video, that's how I'm going to say it. And also Letty. So basically, the big conflict in the story is Robin got abducted. I don't want to say against his will because he was. Okay, it's kind of against his will, but he did get like food and tutoring, and it ultimately led to this like kind of like luscious life he wouldn't have been afforded otherwise at Oxford. However, it is a big conflict for him because that is not the life he chose. Even though that is more luxurious, it is not what he wanted personally. And what starts to happen is there's word around campus of this kind of secret society that is opposed to what Babel is doing. So essentially, they are abducting these foreigners from all across the world, bring them into Babel, forced to use their language essentially to make more silver for the crown. And this kind of plays into a colossal theme in the book of colonialism and imperialism. Babel is essentially taking these languages from these countries, using it for itself, and not giving out any of the benefits. Because while some of these countries may have the silver needed to do the language walking or the silver walking, they don't have the facilities to actually inscribe any of the words on the silver, and they also just don't have like the institutions to teach. And then so yeah, language is kind of viewed as this finite resource in the book, It's used as any other kind of precious valuable. So anyway, back to the secret society. They're like, hey, this is not right. As a scholar at Babel, we don't agree with holding all this knowledge and all this power that Silver gives, and we think we should start handing it out to the countries which we are taking the language from, but they're reaping none of the benefits. Robin kind of tampers with the society a little bit, gets his hands dirty. The way I viewed it, it wasn't this super serious thing to him. Like, he admired the goal of the society, but he really wasn't getting into the nitty gritty of it. He was doing very, very basic actions for the society. However, towards the midway point of the book, this very big event happens, which kind of flips everything on its head and kind of forces Robin's hand in a way. I can't go into much more than that because that's definitely a spoiler territory. But I would say if you do pick up the book and you read, a quarter to a half, just not feeling it, I'll definitely say try to push to that halfway point mark, because there is an event which is going to kind of, spice up the book if you haven't already been enthralled with it. Okay, so first off, I think very basic, I want to cover the text and the prose, and then also the footnotes, because that's something very new that R.F. Kuang included in this book, well, that she didn't include in the Poppy War. Yeah, so there will be some footnotes like this on some pages, which it definitely feels like we're reading like a historical document. It's very cool. Sometimes it gets maybe additional information on the narrative that's happening. Sometimes it could be historical context to what's happening, or when they're talking about a language or something literary in sense, it'll give more background information. I've read some books that do include footnotes like these, or have like a very specialized topic, especially sci-fi, where the book kind of feels like it's written for the elite, or you have to be very, I don't want to say intelligent, but kind of intelligent to read it and break it down in their own way. And I think R.F. Kuang could have fallen into that trap with Babel, but she wrote it in such a way where it felt digestible to to me, and I guess the average audience and reader. And I think the inclusion of these footnotes it was amazing. I loved it. So she does study languages, and you can kind of tell that she is vastly knowledgeable. It's like how much she knows by how she interprets it in the book and how she conveys that knowledge. I think it goes back to that saying, you don't truly know something, and it's also the best way to learn by explaining it like giving it to an elementary school student, which he kind of does here. Not like that dumb, but in a very digestible way. I think her writing has significantly improved. I said earlier that I was kind of taken aback because I think the Poppy War, its style of writing was very easily digestible. You can fly through it with no problems. I never had to backtrack at all. But here it is written. At first, I was kind of annoyed by it because it took me my reading time, because I would track my reading, and it went from the Poppy War, I could do 50 pages in an hour, to this is like 25 pages. And it's not like, the printing size, the size of the text, anything like that. It was just a more difficult read, at least for me. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something I had to get used to. And by the end of the book, I was reading faster, and I gained a more sense of appreciation for it. I think the best word I could probably use to describe the significance and the improvement in her prose and text is it matured. I think a lot. Not saying the Poppy War and the Poppy War trilogy was very bland or childish, and I wouldn't say young adult either. I just think the upgrade to Babel was, it was kind of eye-opening. It's kind of remarkable in a way. I can't really convey to you how big the jump is unless you read the Poppy War trilogy back to back with Babel. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the prose and the text, without getting very hyper specific. I like the footnotes. I think it's a massive improvement. I think if you do struggle with it initially, after spending some time with the book, it will get easier. Okay, next I want to talk about the characters. I'm kind of worried I'm going to get into some spoilery territory here. So again, if you're all sensitive to that, just click off the video. Okay, first off, we have Robin, which is the main character. He's presented as this kind of shy and meager kid who, is very knowledgeable and scholarly, but he also doesn't take a lot of initiative, and he doesn't, step up a lot. He also has this dual mentality between he is enjoying the luscious life that Babel is offering him, not just the scholarly life, but also the friends that he has made. But then he contrasts that to what he feels like he should be doing morally, which is assisting the secret society, which is called the Homie Society, by the way. And he knows that, his country is not benefiting by the silver that Britain is taking. And he's having this huge moral dilemma of where he kind of wants to live both lives and he's living in between. And ultimately, the decision for him is going to have to be made at some point. His character, as mentioned before, there is a huge tonal shift midway through. His character will follow through with that tonal shift. At the end of the book, I would say he's almost a completely different character. I may put this in the negatives, but I want to go into it now. This is a bit tangenty, but Olive Kuang has this thing with main characters that slowly dissolve into kind of like this nonsensical parody of itself. I haven't read any reviews, and this is my personal take, but she makes these characters like Rin from the Poppy World that are very scholarly and intuitive, I feel like. And then over time, they kind of get worn down into these angry like husks of characters. You can kind of see what is going to go on with Robin towards the end, but he basically like all his key traits kind of get flipped on their head. I'm not saying he becomes dumb. I'm saying he kind of becomes like, he kind of, some of the choices he makes at the end just feel like a bit outlandish considering his character. There is some rationale behind why he makes some of these choices, perhaps a little grief, but I don't feel like there was enough justification for the stunts that he pulls off at the very end of the book. It feels kind of like I was blindsided in a way. Like I said, I understand. It just feels like very like shocking, and it kind of ruined it for me too because I saw it with Rin, and you didn't just see it in one book. You saw it throughout the whole 3-book series, and then when I started to see some of those same patterns pop up for Robin, I was just like, oh no. Because towards the end, Robin becomes a bit like insufferable, much as Rin did towards the end of full trilogy. It just became like anytime he had any dialogue with any character, he was just mean. He didn't listen to reason at all, and he was just very like driven by one emotion, which was kind of revenge. But overall, I think he was a very good character compared to Rin from her other series. He solved what he needed to do. I thought he was very interesting. I liked that he was shy and kind of meek, especially when it came into terms of the Homie Society. He wanted to be hands off and he didn't want to get his hands too dirty. And I also appreciate, he's like, this is wrong what I'm doing and I should step up and do something. But at the same time, I have these friends, I have these facilities that have been given to me, and I don't want to compromise that, which I thought was a very nice inner conflict for the character. Okay, next we have Raimi. I don't know his full name. Maybe I'll put it on screen now, maybe I won't. But he is the best friend to Robin. Kind of more like charismatic. I don't want to say egotistical, but he definitely is a little bit more flaunty than Robin. So they kind of go yin and yang. Honestly, there was not that much I can say about this character. He does get into a conflict with Robin over something a little stupid, a little hypocritical, which kind of got drawn on for a very long time, which kind of made me snooze a little bit. Now, I'm going to say what it is in a second, so this is a very hard spoiler, so, just a warning. So basically, Raimi and all the rest of Robin's friends, except for Letty, so basically Raimi and Victoria, they join and help the Homie Society without Robin knowing, and Robin is working with society without Raimi and Victoria knowing. So they kind of keep it behind each other's back. And what happens is Raimi gets mad at Robin for not telling him that he was in the society, while Raimi did the same thing. It was like very like kind of petty, and I'm just like, the whole like everyone that goes to Babel and enrolled is supposed to be these very intelligent, scholarly students. It just seemed like very like emotionally dumb. Yeah, so I can't go into what happens at the end with his character too much. That is a very, very hard spoiler. I know I keep on saying it's a spoiler and then I say a spoiler. It's just, I don't want to ruin it. If you're interested, read the book. I was not a big fan of his character too much. He didn't offer that much to me. So yeah, I think his character did serve a good purpose in the plot. He just wasn't just chilling out. But I personally was not a resounding fan. So next we have Victoria. Again, that is not her actual name. I just don't know how to pronounce it, and that's how I said it. but she is also enrolled at Oxford at Babel. She is a woman of color, so not only is she a woman at Oxford in the 1840s, but she is also black. Those heavy themes of racism, sexism, and it shows that she's had to work significantly harder than everyone else on campus to just be there. And not only to be there, but to be one of the best at Babel. Honestly, for the first half, I did not really care about this character. It was kind of a background character, I felt like, to Robin and Ramey's relationship. I really just didn't bat an eye. However, at the significant turning point that I've been teasing this whole video, her character suddenly goes from this background character to one of the most exciting, interesting characters in the entire story. It literally did a somersault. I was a bit confused. I was like reading it and I kind of like physically like jumped back. I was like, holy shit, like what is happening right now? It was very cool. Her character at the end, she stayed consistent, thank God, unlike Robin. And she kind of had to become Robin's ankle in a way. If that sounds familiar, that it's because it kind of sounds like Katai from the Poppy War and Katai and Rin's relationship. It was a little upsetting that R.F. Kuang fell into some old dynamics. But it's okay. I thought her character was really fun. I thought it was really interesting. They're all character-specific chapters, one for each character, except for Robin because he's the main character, sprinkled throughout the story. And at the very end, you get one for Victoria. And this is like one of my favorite chapters in the book, if not my favorite. Okay, finally, we have Letty. She is a white woman at Oxford in Babel. So she is a woman, which does make it difficult for her. However, she is a corporal's daughter, and she has been living in London her entire life. Letty is kind of this pampered, kind of like as expected aristocrat that you would see in London at the time, I guess. While she is a woman, and that does come with its own challenges at the time and at the institution, she really kind of hard for her to get on board with the whole Hermes society thing. She's just not really understanding of it too much. Yeah, she's definitely been kind of brainwashed in a way. Not even brainwashed, it's just that's the condition she's lived in. She doesn't think Britain is doing anything, wrong, which ultimately leads to some, twists and turns in the narrative some little surprises. I thought her character too was on the same par as Victoria in the beginning. It was kind of a background character. She was moody, and that's kind of how they played her out to be. Yeah, she just didn't have anything significant that I really cared about. Until you get to the halfway point and her character does a shift too. Like everyone else, she does become basically every character after this halfway point gets elevated much more than they will in the first half. That's why I'm saying stick with it until that halfway point, and then the book is going to be amazing. Well, not amazing, but more amazing. So yeah, the characters I thought very good, full core characters. Much more solving of the plot, like I said, than characters in her previous works. But overall, I don't know. I'm very indifferent. I enjoyed them. I kind of wanted something like just a little bit more, not like interactions, because they do share these interactions, like these loving, caring interactions with each other. Well, it's just like, oh, they're studying together, they're doing homework together, they're having some coffee together. But it's just, I don't know. I think if you've read the book, they'll understand, but just a bit more intimacy, not like a physical, like shared, intimate relationship, but just something to make it feel a bit more real. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. Okay, so now that we got to the characters, I guess I'll do my pros and cons. I'm probably restating a bunch of stuff that I've already said, but pros, I must say, is the writing style. I loved it. I adored it. Basically, all the foreshadowing and events that were going to happen were foreshadowed, and it felt like appropriate payoff for me to annotate, because when it came up again, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I thought was going to happen. Not in a bad way, like it was predictable, but just like it rewards you for paying attention to the text. Additionally, I really liked the plot, the magic system. I don't think I've talked enough about the magic system. Some books, fantasy books or ones with magic system, it feels like you have the world and you have the magic system slapped on top, like kind of like a cake. This one feels like they were baked together. The magic system is so interwoven in the world itself, like politics, infrastructure, like social class, even like who has access to it and who doesn't. It's basically the driving force of everything. and it's so I don't know, it's so remarkable. I thought the magic system in the Poppy War was very intuitive and very interesting. This one just flips it on its head. There was so many times, like I'll say most of these green labels on here are just times where Olive Kwong gives an example of how language is used for some of the syllable and describe its effects. And I just like highlighted it and tabbed it because I thought it was so interesting. Anytime that she talked about the magic system, I was just blown away. And I don't know, I've watched some reviews, I've read some reviews, and everyone I think agrees about how amazing this magic system is. It's so unexpected. It's not this like wave a wand and bippity boppity boop like cast a spell. It's just that this is probably the magic system is the one most interesting thing to me about this story. The world, I guess the world kind of goes with the magic system. It's very unique, and it takes place in Oxford, which is a real place. And the world and the events that happen, like the Opium War, all present here, but kind of given an alternate narrative to fit with the magic. Um, I think I liked it, to be honest. I thought the world did what it needed to. It fit with the magic system, like I said, very well. I don't know. I don't have that much more to say about the book. I think you should read it. There's a reason why a lot of people are reading it. Hey guys, this is Alex from the future actually, because while I was editing the video, I knew there was a lot of inconsistencies going on, and mostly just things I didn't talk about that I really wanted to add. I don't know if it was some illness-induced psychosis that I was under, but I just want to go back now and kind of clarify some information. I think the biggest thing that I left out for some reason was a spoiler discussion. The entire review, basically, I kind of like teased at the spoiler and what happened at the second part of the book. Like how in Minecraft, you have a stick, a carrot on a stick, dangling in front of the pig. It's kind of just leading everyone on the entire time and didn't really talk about it. So now I just want to kind of give like a brief little overview of what happened at the end of the book, which I think will kind of like help kind of flesh out my opinions, especially about the characters. So basically what happens is Robin and company go on this kind of fourth year expedition out to, what is it? Oh gosh. Okay. I think it's pronounced a little weird. Canton? Like Canton in China. So basically why Robin and his friends are going to China is for Robin to kind of act as a diplomatic translator between a level, not love all like ER, but ELL. I'll put it on screen. I'm just gonna say level, and then this Chinese commissioner, and the conflict comes from Britain wants to sell a lot of opium to China, and they're just like eating it up. And Britain is getting all these profits from essentially being like a cartel dealer to China, but then the result being that China is basically collapsing because of this severe dependency on opium. Like all these lounges that they show, just the grasp that it has on these Chinese citizens. So the commissioner was like, yeah, we need to get rid of opium. We can't have this anymore. And then Britain's like, oh, well, like we need money. Like this is like our biggest like profitable export to you guys. And they also talk about how they kind of like have their hands dabbling in India, like growing these really expansive fields of opium. And then so they have India maintain and harvest the crop. They get the crop and then they send it off to China. So they're basically just like exploiting two different countries and receiving all kind of like the net profit essentially. But it turns out Robin has this little chat with the commissioner without the professor, and I don't think it's the professor, it's just someone else. But basically they have this standalone chat, and the commissioner was like, yeah, I'm not gonna have any opium anymore. That's a big no-no. He kind of like explains the whole situation to Robin, and keep in mind at this time Robin is he's still split between joining the Homie Society and keeping his life at Babel and Oxford. So he goes, they have this talk, and he's explaining what I just said right there about the opium trade. Kind of like figures out like these people at Oxford, like they've come here on this diplomatic mission to basically was to set up a means of a pretext for war. And the war isn't necessarily about opium, it's going to war with China. So once they are defeated, once Britain defeats China, China has this huge source of silver. So they basically wanted to set up a reason to invade China, which the reason would be the the trade policy regarding opium. So then they'll be like, okay, well, not gonna buy opium. So we're just gonna invade you. Oh, and we're also gonna steal the silk. So this kind of collapsed. So like literally like like within the day, like opium lounges stopped burning. So Robin, his friends, and Professor Lovell, they hightail it back to London. Okay, so then Robin is a little mad because he was lied to about the whole point of the expedition. While it was a diplomatic translation endeavor, it was more just to create kind of a front-facing lie about going to war. So he goes to the office and he's like, this is wrong, what you guys are doing is wrong. And initially he had another confrontation with the professor earlier in the novel, but I think he just really wasn't as sure as he was at this point. So when he goes to the cabin, he is very dead set in knowing between what is right and what is wrong. At this point, he knows what is going on is wrong. So the professor is just like Lucas being a little bratty kid. I got you off the streets, and then I took you to Oxford. You have this like, joyous life that little kind could never really obtain otherwise. And then Robin gets mad. He pulls out this silver ball that was used previously by the Homie Society to kill somebody. It basically like ruptures his little chest, kills the professor, and that is what marks this big, I would say, the biggest turning point in the story. Then what happens is Robin, Victoria, Letty, and Raimi all come in, and they all help cover up this model on the ship. And it gets very interesting because they have to figure out a way to cover up the model while returning back on this like ocean voyage to London. And it kind of, their hand is then played for them. They cannot go back to Oxford really because at some time the model will be traced back to them. So now the only option really is to join the Homie Society. So yeah, they get back and we kind of start feeling a little, I would say, sus of Letty. Because keep in mind, Letty was, born and raised in London, a daughter of a corporal, still had this very nice, cushy life. And she, is feeling a little bit iffy about the whole homies, counter movement idea. Where I actually, this is why I love that I annotated. This is quite beautiful. Okay, this was such a special moment. I literally added a sticky note right here because I thought, how significant this was going to be. So I'll just read you what it says right here. This is just basically showing that Letty is basically the imposter in this situation. She is about to, she's about to betray everybody. She says, still something did not seem right, and Robin could tell from Victoria's and Raimi's face that they thought so too. It took him a moment to realize what it is that grated on him, and when it did, it would bother him constantly, now and thereafter. But it seemed a great paradox, the fact that after everything they had told Letty, all the pain that they had shared, she was the one who needed comfort. So this is basically, they all open up about their own personal history of being discriminated against and why that is kind of contributing to why they want to be in the Homie Society. Because they all have been plucked from these countries that Silver is kind of screwing over, essentially. So they have this, they kind of feel like they have this like obligation to fight back against it. However, I would say Letty is more so ignorant to that. Yeah, so then I wrote right here, because I was kind of connecting the dots. I said, I believe Letty will ultimately betray her friends. And because she does not see the evil in Babel and wants to maintain her privileged life. Which is what ultimately will happen, because when they get back to Babel, or when they get back to Oxford, they group up with the Homie Society. And she basically says, Officer, it's them! And then they all come, and Letty actually shoots Raimi and kills him. Keep in mind, they will not best friends, but I think Letty did have like a passionate love for Raimi in a way. It's left very unclear if she killed him because he denied her advances, or it was just a spur of the moment thing. Because it was very quick how it happened, which I do like. Victoria and Robin's perception of it is two very different things. Robin is just because he's now grieving, so this is afterwards. He's Letty was jealous. She's upset that she was getting denied by Raimi. But then Victoria, which was best friends with Letty because they were kind of a pale the whole time, it was very spur in the moment, and she gets what she did out of instinct. And even later in the book, when they confront her about it, she says it was instinct too. So I don't know, I think it's kind of like an interesting, up in the air question to say which side you side will support. Anyway, so basically how the book ends is, well, Victoria and Robin, since Raimi is dead and Letty betrayed them, is now on the other side. They decide to basically do a siege of the Tower of Babel. So they go in and they say, this is wrong. And then they kind of like, anyone who doesn't agree hops out, anyone who does agree stays in, and they kind of just stay there, and they kind of watch as the city of London and kind of the country itself falls apart without the help of Silver. And there's another thing called they're called resonance of rods, and they basically act as proxy Silver that does the same effect but from a centralized area. So Robin goes in and he starts like unhooking all these rods and just watches as the country like slowly kind of goes to shit, really. Basically what happens is the army initially says, hey, can you stop? Hey, can you stop? Hey, can you stop? And then Robin's like, no. And then ultimately what happens is some infrastructure that is supported by the help of the Silver starts collapsing, namely the Birmingham Bridge. And then the army's like, okay, enough is enough. We're about to come whip their ass if you do not get out of the tower and surrender. Basically what they end up doing is they use this one Silver that is inscribed, and its ability is to counteract all the magic within pre-existing Silver. So you touch the Silver that is the anti-Silver to another Silver, and it kind of like wipes its effect. They do that to the Hotel Tower, and it collapses with them inside. And it kind of like essentially leaves it up in the air about how the Silver Revolution will turn out now, because like all the rods were destroyed. Basically all this archived information and knowledge about Silver is gone. Like the biggest Silver working headquarters in the entire country, and probably the entire world for that matter, is now gone. And yeah, Victoria actually does skip town before this happens. She's like, hey, I don't want to be selfish or anything, but this is not how I want to die. And Robin's like, hey man, that's okay. And then they hug it out and she leaves. This ending felt very close. I hate to say it again to spoiler alert for the Poppy War, but that's how the Poppy War ended. The trilogy did too. That Katai and Ren did both die at the end of the series. It just felt like a pattern of Kuang killing off her main protagonist at the end of the novel. But I really liked the last little like sentence or two of the book. It says, this is as the building, the tower is essentially falling on him, and this is the last line. He remembered the stillness, the peace. As the window smashed in, Robin shut his eyes and imagined his mother's face. She smiles, she says his name. I don't know. I just really like that. And yeah, that's how the book ends. Okay, so one more thing I just wanted to add was discussing this theme that I thought was really cool. If you remember back to when I gave the full title of the story, which is Babel or the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. Okay, so Babel is pretty self-explanatory. That is the setting. And then you have the arcane history of the Translators' Revolution. That's also the conflict. I think the necessity of violence is a really interesting point of discussion, because it kind of comes in. I didn't really understand when that was going to get introduced, and it comes in towards like almost the very end. So Griffin, which is Robin's stepbrother, is manning the Homie Society, at least at Oxford. And his stance on the issue is the government will never listen to us without us inciting some violence. Because passing out brochures and doing these peaceful protests will not change anything. We need to inflict some kind of harm that doesn't have to be physical. It just has to, like damage property, or just some kind of act of violence is what it takes to get people's attention. I had this quote I wanted to share about this because I really liked it. So here's just a quote about Griffin's perspective on the necessity of violence. He says, "Violence shows them how much we're willing to give up," said Griffin. "Violence is the only language they understand because the system of extraction is inherently violent. Violence shocks the system, and the system cannot survive the shock. You have no idea what they're capable of, truly. You can't imagine how the world might shift unless you pull the trigger. And I don't know, I just thought this was a very interesting idea because you have another character that is a complete opposite that says we don't need to use violence to follow our agenda or our message. We can do it peacefully and make sure that no one gets harmed or nothing gets harmed. And then you kind of can see how Robin and Victoria at the end, what sides they follow. Robin ultimately follows his stepbrother, saying they need to suffer, basically. They will not understand our message without them getting something taken away from them. But Victoria is like, we don't need to go to that extreme. We can still prove our point without causing all this damage. Okay, and finally, this is the last thing I wanted to add in post is my score. I must have been on crack when I gave this book a score initially. I said it was an 86, which would be a B+. And how I look at it is if R.F. Kuang personally came into my bedroom, handed me this novel and said, Alex, please grade it like I'm a high school English teacher. Initially, I gave it a 86, which 86 out of 100, that's the scale I'd use, which would be a B+ in like American academic standards. Like that is just outrageous. I read the whole thing, I enjoyed it. I had to enjoy it because I annotated this whole damn book. So now that I'm not in like some state of hypnosis, I want to go back and change my review. My final numerical review of the book is I'm going to give it a 96. It's going to go up a whole 10 points. It is a 96 out of 10. The only reason it is not higher, it's just, okay, there's also some like pushback against giving it 100 because I definitely don't think this is a masterpiece of a book. I think the biggest drawback for me is some of the characters, like Rami's death. I just felt like it didn't hit me too hard, and I felt like it was a really pivotal point that the character development up to that had to have swayed me to have it be such a powerful moment and turning point in the novel, but it wasn't for me. Then I also think Robin's, I would say, descent into madness at the end was just kind of unbelievable for me. At the whole other half of the story, he was this completely different character, and following Rami's death and this grief that sets into him completely changes him. And I can understand how grief will alter his mentality, but at this point, I felt too unrealistic in terms of the character and what we've known so far about him. So anyway, that concludes my review of Babel by R.F. Kuang. I hope you guys enjoyed, and have a good day.